So today we're extremely fortunate. We have one of Manhattan's most active and prolific real estate attorneys and a dear friend, Russ Blaymore, in the house.
What's going on? Thank you so much for having me, Lance. Thank you for having me, Jamie.
So Russ is a partner at MMPS, a full-service boutique law firm that primarily focuses on real estate. So Russ, welcome to What's Really Going On.
Really appreciate you guys having me. I'm psyched to be here.
That's great.
Can't wait to get into it about commercial leasing.
Let's do it, baby.
Let's do it.
So Russ, you've been a real estate attorney for quite a bit of time and worked on some really notable real estate transactions. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got to where you are?
Absolutely. So I come from a long line of real estate people. So great. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but my great grandfather came here with nothing, ended up with some real estate. We own some shopping centers, yada yada yada. My father's a real estate attorney. My aunt's a real estate attorney. I'm a real estate attorney. So real estate's in my blood. I've always been passionate about it. I've been around it since I was a baby, and I always knew I would be in it in some capacity. My father's a real estate lawyer, so I kind of just followed in his footsteps, and here I am today.
Was your dad at MMPS or?
No, he has his own firm on Long Island, actually, and I worked with him for 9 years.
Got it. Where
so
on the
he
island?
trained me. Roslyn, the Rozzy Roz.
The Rozzy Roz in the house. So while we're on the topic about, real estate law and all that good stuff, what differentiates you and your firm from your competitors? Obviously, there's a lot of real estate attorneys out there that do residential
Absolutely.
and commercial. So what's like your main difference?
So I would say what differentiates me and my team, my leasing team, from other commercial real estate lawyers is 90% of what we do is commercial leasing, and we're very responsive, fast, and nimble. We also don't bite off more than we can chew. So we have our finger on the pulse of how much deal flow we have. So if I get some referrals and they're all coming in at once, I'm not afraid to say, listen, guys, I'm too busy to take this on.
Yep.
Because I like to think that my brand is getting things done well, protecting my clients and getting it done quickly.
Well, I know that firsthand. We've worked on a lot of deals together.
Yeah.
So, obviously that is 100% true.
Thank you. I
Everything
appreciate
that
that.
you just said. And in the last decade or so, lease flexibility has become increasingly important to
Absolutely.
tenants, right?
Yes.
Obviously, with the rise of co-working and WeWork, people want shorter term leases. They want more flexibilities built in, et cetera. What type of protections are you finding nowadays that need to be built into leases and that you really focus on when advising your clients?
So on the tenant side, there's knocking at the door. Oh, it's knocking at the door. So there's good and there's bad, right? Good on the good side, right? You're an expanding business. You're a tech company, you're blowing up, you just got $50 million in investment. You need more space. Okay, for that, in the lease, you would want to write a first offer for contiguous space, for next door space to expand. You're an expanding client. Right of first refusals, similar. And obviously the devil's in the details with that, with how much you're going to be paying for the rent, how much you're going to be paying for the additional rent for that contiguous space.
Like FMV.
Exactly. Is it
versus-
FMV versus the straight escalations? Are you paying the same amount as you're paying currently? Who's going to determine that FMV, fair market value?
So let's talk about that for a second. How does that typically work?
So typically there's a broker chosen by both sides. Okay. And then if there's different ways of doing it. If they don't agree, then they'll choose a third broker who's going to basically determine who's right, or you can determine who is closer to being right. So they'll take the median average of the two.
So you're going through an arbitration process.
Exactly. It's basically ballpark arbitration.
Got it. Well, while we're on the topic of negotiating leases, when you began your career, how have you seen the standard lease change? I know that I've seen deals with riders. I've seen deals with crazy print that's not even typed on Word. I mean, you see something with the first letter of the paragraph is big and the other letters are small. So how have you seen leases change over the years? And have you seen any specific landlords having more tenant favorable leases?
So the optics of it, which we were talking on in the beginning, have changed immensely, obviously. Most landlords are using REBNY forms, either loft, office, or retail with a rider, right? Now, especially in New York City, most of the office landlords are using their own lease forms, and they can range from 40 pages to, I've seen 220-page leases. So they've changed immensely. The average number of clauses has gone from probably 35 to about 60, and they are much more landlord favorable now.
Now, why has it changed from 35 to 60?
Because so I can tell you from my own experience, as you're doing more and more deals, you see things go wrong.
Yep.
And then you try to protect your clients from that going wrong in the lease.
Natural evolution.
So it just keeps building and building and building. And yeah, now you see 150-page leases all the time.
Nowadays, with people wanting to simplify every process, do you think there's ever going to be a standard form of lease?
God, I hope not, because I'm out of business. But no, you're absolutely right. A lot of landlords right now are doing these so-called, and I did it for a gym once, called a shotgun lease. Like, it's a very short lease form, and it's like, take it or leave it. This is it.
Yeah,
this is our lease. So a few landlords that I've worked with, I'm on the phone with them. I'm reviewing the lease. I get the term sheet for my client. I'm reviewing the lease, and they're like, there's things missing from this so-called short form lease form from the term sheet. So I'm like, you're not even gonna like conform it to the terms that we agreed to. And you see landlords trying to do it, but I can't say that any landlords have effectively done it. And that was really to compete with WeWork.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the rise of WeWork and
Right.
Hotel and these simplified processes,
Yeah.
I think people just want to sign on a dotted line and know that everything's taken care of,
Right.
and also avoid legal fees.
Right.
Right, because legal fees can get very, very exorbitant.
Right.
And not to
No, it's
speak the
fine.
obvious,
No,
but
of
you
course, it's
cannot
money.
replace a human that has done this countless times and knows the ins and the outs of what's important to their tenant or landlord clients. Is that correct?
Yes. Until like every building is uniform and every lease is uniform, I can't see that happening.
Yeah. And every term is uniform.
Exactly.
Right?
Like
Because
there's a
there's-
form lease, and this is, like the government would have to step in. I don't want to get into politics, but it would be insane.
Yeah.
It could never happen.
Well, it's funny that we're talking about this because I have clients often ask me or tell me that they could negotiate a lease and sign by next week.
Yeah.
So when I hear that, I kind of go into the process and I go, it is 100% impossible for you to negotiate this lease in a week. And not because you can't work fast enough.
Meaning without a lawyer. Like they're doing it on their own with you.
Even with a lawyer, they think it can be done.
I've done it.
You've done it, but how hard is it to really do that? Because you obviously
It would
have,
take a relationship with the attorney on the other side.
Yep.
So they're going to drop everything for you. They owe you a favor. They're doing you a favor. Because once you turn around a lease on the tenant side, typically the turnaround side for the second turn from the landlord, 3 to 5 business days, I'd say. So to turn around a lease in 1 week, it takes me reviewing the lease, me getting on the phone with the landlord's attorney and saying, let's have an all hands call. And that's really the only way to do it.
Yeah,
And that's if the landlord's willing to do that and if their attorney's willing to do that.
So
It's not the way things are typically done.
So let's talk about that for a second. So start to finish.
Yeah.
What is the typical timeline that tenants should expect to receive a final form of lease from when they first get it, just based on the averages and the deals that you've worked on in your career?
3 weeks.
3 weeks from start to finish.
Yeah. Yeah, 3 weeks. As long as it's a direct lease and not a sublease, obviously.
Right.
Subleases you get, takes a lot longer.
Right. Consent,
Which
all that.
which tenants and subtenants and sublandlords don't want. They want it to be very quick.
Right.
So they get very frustrated.
So obviously we're familiar with the whole consent process, but
Yeah.
maybe you could break it down for our listeners and let them understand what goes into consent.
Absolutely.
And why it could take so long, 30, 60 days, whatever's in the overlease
Right.
to receive that.
Okay, so we talked earlier about like protecting clients and the fluidity of expansion and contraction of a tenant, right? If you're going out of business, you want a sublease provision that's broad. So one of the things I focus on, I focus on everything in the lease, but that's very, very important to hunker down on is the assignment and sublet clause. Some landlords have clauses in there that say that the tenant, if they want a sublease, they have to use the landlord's broker.
So stop there for a second.
Okay, I have a million of these. It's crazy.
So I see that often.
Yeah.
How conflicted is that? And talk to
It's an immense conflict of interest.
Okay.
Because if you're a landlord and you're using your broker, first of all, a lot of these landlords that do this have several buildings in the city. So that broker who works in-house is going to favor those buildings.
And not only the buildings within their reach, but they are representing direct space in that building.
Correct.
So
That's
they're going to
I was
push tenants to
just
the
gonna say
direct
that.
space versus the sublease space.
Because they're collecting rent no matter what.
They're
matter
collecting
what.
rent no matter
Yeah.
what. Right. So the other part of it is they're in no rush to get the deal done.
So now that consent clock. So let's talk about that. I'm
consent
sorry. I
clock.
just
So-
wanted to break it down for our
typically,
listeners.
I'd say on an average lease, what I'm able to negotiate from a landlord's attorney is within 30 days from the quote consent package, the landlord has to either approve, deny, approve or deny the consent. So they have to either say, yes, we're consenting to it, or no, we're not, and here's why.
If
So
you
I'd say
don't hear
30
back,
days.
if you don't hear back in that period, is it deemed consent?
That's what you try to have that added. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They waive their right to disapprove.
What if it's silent in the lease? How does that typically work?
So if it's silent in the lease, then it's not waived. If it just says like 30 days, which I've seen this before, never mind. But sometimes I'll get a sub-tenant or sub-landlord as a new client. I wasn't their attorney as the tenant, so I didn't review and mark up the lease for them. And you'll see all types of things like, yeah, there's a 30-day limit to a denier or approve consent on a sublease. Okay, what's the remedy? Now what? Do they waive their right to, is it deemed approved? What happens? So then you have to basically say, now you're going through the default process. So you put the landlord in default, you're in default on the lease, they have a right to cure, so it pushes everything out.
And then you lose the prospective subtenant,
Probably.
likely. So
Probably.
whatever you can sue for, the damages,
Yeah, exactly.
you're likely not coming away a winner in that situation.
Correct.
So when that happens, do you fault the previous attorney, or do you think that falls more on the broker for also not picking up on that? Because obviously
It's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think that good brokers notice things like that, and they know to focus on the assignment and sublet clause.
Yep.
Because it affects them and it's really important to their clients. And I mean, from working with you and from working with other, great brokers, you guys read the lease. You guys actually read the lease and you care about what it says. And
we comment it.
You comment on it.
Yep.
You redline the lease like a lawyer would. I mean, and that's because you want to make sure that your client is protected and you want to make sure they stay with you.
Learning how to read a lease, and I'm going to basically speak to newer brokers, not necessarily all of the audience, but I encourage anybody that gets into the business, and I told this to Jamie when he first started, read every single lease for every deal that we're working on. If you don't understand a provision, come to me, ask me questions, and you need to understand the lease better than the attorney.
Right.
And I think, obviously, you can mark up a lease better than I can, but I think high-level points, I'm going to have the same comments that you will. And that comes with time and experience and age and all of that good stuff. But I know there are plenty of brokers that I've worked with that are counterparties where they don't offer any comments to their clients, and they're just kind of, just taking whatever we send and telling their clients to sign. And I scratch my head and say, wow, that is really wild.
Yeah. There's a definite partnership between a good broker and a good lawyer.
Yeah.
We're on the, we're trying to get the deal done. We're trying to get the client protected and make sure that they stay around for us as clients and that they're happy. Really, it's up to us to do that together. So I think that brokers who just kind of hand it off to me and are just aloof, just like,
Get it done.
When we're signing, let me know. You know, it's a bad move.
Yeah, absolutely. That's actually a really good segue into our next question. Over the past couple of years, what have you seen from landlords on what clauses they're willing to push back on the most and which they're got their feet in the mud?
So we kind of talked about this earlier about the optics of leases and how they've changed. One of the things in the way that leases have changed detrimentally to tenants and guarantors really is the good guy guarantee.
Sure.
So the evolution of the good guy guarantee, it was probably invented, 20 years ago. And the purpose of it was it's a limited personal guarantee whereby someone is personally liable for the rent and utilities and operating expenses, call it additional rent, the money, up until the date that the tenant gives back the keys of the space in good condition, right? Everything's in good working order, the utilities. Nowadays, it's evolved over time from it was basic rent and giving back the keys to like additional rent and giving back the keys. Now it's a full payment and performance guarantee up until the date that you fulfill all of the good guy elements.
And there's usually a notice provision.
And there's a notice provision, which that was the first thing was getting notice, which I kind of understand, but that kind of is, and a good negotiation tactic for brokers is negotiating the notice provision with the security, right? They live together. Because what is the purpose of security and notice? To make sure you're getting rent while the tenant is in the space. So, and before you get a new tenant. So if say you have a 3-month security with a 3-month notice clause, the landlord now effectively has 6 months of rent to find a new tenant.
That's right.
Right.
And we see it often. And oftentimes, I'm guilty of this. Sometimes when I'm negotiating final term sheets, I do not address the notice provision and the good guy guarantee. And I do a ton of work with startup hedge funds, as you know, and startup companies in general. And a lot of them, the second they hear personal guarantee in any way, shape, or form, they automatically cringe and they say, there's no effing way that I'm signing this. But once you really break it down and you say, okay, well, listen, it's a limited personal guarantee, limited to the time you occupy the space, and you explain how landlord-friendly New York City is and how the eviction process works.
It's market. It really is market now.
It's market.
But it's still scary.
And are you going to be a bad guy and squat in your space?
Yeah. No, but let's say you drop the ball and you don't have the correct insurance and someone gets hurt in your space. Those are the things that are one in a million
Okay.
that I worry about.
Right.
So
When it's a
let's
full
talk
payment
about
and
that.
performance guarantee.
So if that happened, you would be
Personally liable.
Personally.
But you would have to also not have the right insurance. So now the lease has certain insurance requirements. You don't fulfill them as the tenant. Someone gets hurt, or the building, you start a fire, the building, there's casualty. If it's a full payment and performance good guy guarantee and it's during the time you're in the space and the tenant, and by the way, most guarantees say that they don't have to exhaust the remedies against the tenant first. They can exhaust them against the guarantor first, which is obviously something I try to negotiate out. But they could go after you personally.
And just to clarify the difference between a good guy guarantee and other forms of guarantee, I think it's important for the listeners to understand.
Let's reel
what
it back
really
in
is.
a little bit. Yeah.
What is the difference? High level. What is the difference between a good guy guarantee and the other forms of guarantee?
Really simple.
Corporate.
So
on and
personal
forth.
guarantee, think like barbershop.
Yeah.
Like he signs the lease in his own name, like Russ's barbershop, right? If you're signing a personal guarantee, you may as well just sign the lease.
Right.
It's full guarantee, you're on the hook.
Right.
Okay. Corporate guarantee, it's usually when there's an operating company and a subsidiary, or there's a shell company and a real company. And, you know, landlords are on to you and they say, let me see your financials. You know, they look at the tenant's financials and like, oh, you've been in business for 3 months or you have no money.
Right.
Is there a corporate guarantor that we could have that has sufficient assets to cover your obligations?
Right.
And there would be a corporate guarantee, which is like a full guarantee for the corporation
Right.
that is the parent company.
Right.
And then a good guy guarantee is a personal guarantee, a warm body
Right.
that is limited to those obligations during the term of the lease where the tenant is still in the space
Up until the
up
point.
until the date they give back the keys.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been involved in countless leasing transactions.
Yes.
What excites you the most about being a real estate attorney? When you wake up in the morning, like what gets you jazzed up more than anything else to come to work and negotiate real estate deals?
So I like to think of myself as a pretty social guy. And I love meeting new people, dealing with new people. I mean, some of my clients are CEOs that have MBAs from Harvard. I'm dealing with just like amazing people. And I'm advising them, which I get a kick out of. I'm like, you know, dealing with extremely intelligent, successful people every day. And I love that. I mean, I love the lease process also, and I love real estate, but I really enjoy meeting and dealing with new people and being a trusted advisor to them.
You know, the one thing that I can say after working with you countless times, you're also a hell of a problem solver and you anticipate problems before they actually happen.
I appreciate that.
And, you know, I think being on the legal side, you always have to have the what if mindset.
Right.
What
I'm a
if?
worrier.
The worrier. You have to
I'm
be.
a
I mean,
worrier,
even
yeah.
before you came in here, I mean, for all the listeners, he's like, you know, I have this friend of mine who's an entertainment lawyer, and he told me that we should have some sort of document and agreement that I own the rights. And I'm like, dude, slow down. You're fine. But that's the mentality of an attorney. It's
I think
always
like
the
a lawyer.
what if and the God forbids.
Right.
And you know, it's a very interesting mindset to have, but you want that person on your side when
Right.
they're negotiating a document
Absolutely.
on your behalf.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there any specific deal that you've worked on in your career that kind of takes the cake in terms of, you know, the most exciting, complex transaction you've worked on, or most interesting people and characters?
No need to name any names.
Yeah, I'm not
by
going
the
to name
way.
names. I just finished a very complicated tri-party moving into different offices, complicated deal that, yeah, I mean, it's always fun when you can kind of match up timing because, listen, I'm representing a lot of office tenants who have to move in from one space to another. They're moving someone into their old space on a sublease. And, you know, to be able to time that up perfectly, it just feels good. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes they need to go into temp space, or sometimes they need to, you know, go into WeWork, for example. But when you're able to line it all up on a large, complicated deal and everything just kind of gets in a row like that, it feels good.
Speaking of WeWork, have any tenants that you've worked with in the past actually have you read the WeWork?
Yeah, sure.
form?
I've read and marked up several HQ deals.
And do they actually concede on business points?
Yes, absolutely.
So to
They
that,
have good lawyers over there.
yeah. So to that point, obviously there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
What is the most challenging part to being a real estate attorney, whether it be negotiating leases, whether it be the personality side of things and dealing with tricky clients
Or tricky brokers?
or tricky brokers?
There's a lot of personalities. Absolutely.
Or
Yeah.
in layman's terms, just getting business.
Egos and
what's-
personalities.
What's the hardest part?
So that you just said, you just explained why it's so hard. I have to do all of that.
Right.
I have to bring in business. I have to maintain my clients. I have to read the leases. I have to make sure that I don't miss anything in these 100-page leases.
Right.
Devil's in the details. They're very complicated and complex. There's several turns of the leases, dealing with personalities, dealing with clients, pressure coming down on me like, why is this not done? Why is it taking more than 2 weeks? And for something that's completely out of my control. For example, I'm on the landlord side and the tenant's lawyer's taking forever. I'm on the landlord side or I'm on the tenant side and the landlord just is in Vietnam. Like we're at lease signing. I get this all the time. The signatory's in Vietnam. He's off the grid. I'm like, okay, all right. I don't know what to say about that, but all kinds of excuses I hear. So there's just a lot going on.
It's everything. It's the whole package.
I like to think of myself as like a glorified waiter, right? I'm like, I got to bring everyone in the restaurant. I got to serve them good food, right? I got to give a good product, my lease. And I'm waiting on several tables at once.
So how do you manage?
The food has to be hot when I deliver it.
So how do you manage expectations, right? Everybody has these high expectations. That's what it's all.
No, that's it. You have to manage expectations. You have to explain to your clients when they're like I just got a new client and whatever, it's a large food company distributor, and they're like, we need this done in 2 weeks. And I'm like, it's not going to be done in 2 weeks. So you need to start making alternative plans for your office. Like you need temp space. I could talk to this landlord if they have temp space or line up a WeWork. It's all about managing expectations.
So let me ask you one more thing, because you said you'll speak to a WeWork. So obviously, because you're an attorney, you could actually perform brokerage duties without a license. Do you ever broker deals?
No, I don't.
Have you ever brokered a deal?
I would love to, and it'd be fun. No, I have not.
All right, if you ever have a friend that needs space, we'll co-broke it together. Just putting that out there.
All right.
You mentioned representing both landlords and tenants. What do you find are the biggest differences, and which do you prefer representing? Which do you find are more tricky to deal with?
Great question. So I can't say I prefer one or the other. My whole life, like as I was coming up, I wanted to have landlord clients. Okay. Right? Like that's like in my role, like you've landlord clients, you made it. So that being said, I always like to stick up for underdogs. Okay. And I feel like the tenant's the underdog, and I enjoy that. I like the challenge of getting a new lease I've never seen before and like looking for all the quote landmines in it, like how are they trying to get me?
Right.
That's fun for me. That's a challenge. And on the landlord side, I love it because it's a lot easier. You have a form that you're used to. After a while from working with the landlord, you know what they like, you know what they don't like.
And you know where people are going to push back on and what to concede on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just easier.
Yeah.
It's less challenging.
So let's talk about that for a second. Do you ever see when you're working on a deal and there's, let's say, a Fortune 500 company on the other side, do they ever provide their own form of lease to give to the landlord?
Great question. I've never had that happen on the office side, only in retail. In retail, it happens a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to say, but like international restaurant chains, a lot of them use their own leases.
Got it.
Parking garages in the city, a lot of them use their own leases.
Understood. So what's your biggest pet peeve when working on deals? Or did you ask that already?
No.
Okay, yeah. What's your biggest pet peeve?
Annoying brokers. No. My biggest pet peeve is and listen, I love lawyers. I love dealing with lawyers. They're great. But when I get a lawyer on the other side who has a big ego, just like takes himself a little bit too seriously, is just a jerk for no reason. And when they don't know how to redline. So, I mean, there are still lawyers out there who are handwriting comments with like good clients.
Yeah.
like
I've seen it.
Real deal landlords have lawyers who are like handwriting comments and don't know how to like convert a PDF to a Word format and don't know how to like redline at all. So that's a big pet peeve of mine. When people don't know how to use tech in law, it's very frustrating. They don't know how to email. I'm getting faxes. It's crazy. Literally.
I don't even know if we have a fax machine on the floor anymore.
I didn't know that Microsoft Word was still considered tech.
Yeah, right. For lawyers, it is.
Yeah.
So while we're talking about pet peeves, I've had a number of my clients actually do their own lease negotiations in-house, not using outside counsel.
Right.
Where they'll have a head of real estate that's not necessarily in New York, and they'll have them read the lease, mark it up, and then send it back. How do you feel about that as a real estate attorney, especially when you're on the other side of a deal?
So it depends. Sometimes you have general counsel who is extremely smart, is extremely experienced, and they've done New York City leasing. Okay, maybe they have a background in it. Maybe they've just done enough quantity where they know what they're doing. They're still not going to know what they're doing as well as me or another professional like me, but it could be good enough.
Good enough.
At the end of the day, it's probably a bad idea. And to save that few, whatever $1,000, whatever it's going to be, you might end up paying hundreds of thousands of dollars later. And I've seen it happen. So it's really important to hire, a lawyer that knows what they're doing, specialized in New York City leasing, and has experience with the type of deal that you're working on.
Sure.
Yeah.
So speaking of having to pay an extra $200,000,
Yeah.
there's a phenomenon of growing space in New York where landlords will water their floors with a little magic pot and the floors will magically grow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen this over the years as you've had, like, the client signs a 10-year year.
Oh, yeah.
10-year lease.
You can always audit them.
10 years from then, like, the landlord comes back
Listen,
and says, hey.
the size does change. I mean, common areas go down. Like, there's different ways of measuring. So there's just landlords that are more opportunistic than others. And there's some old school landlords that say, they don't use a loss factor, and they're just like, or they use a very small loss factor. And then there's other landlords that are very aggressive and use the maximum that you're allowed to use under REBNY.
And some that even go further than the maximum they're allowed to use under REBNY.
I've seen that too.
But why isn't it illegal?
Why isn't it illegal? It's a very complicated question. Because of the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules.
It's funny because we've dealt with it a number of times where we have a client that's in space and then magically they're 10,000 square feet. Their lease expires, all of a sudden they're 12,000 square feet. But what I always say is,
crazy.
10,000 square feet at $120 a foot is the same thing as 12,000 square feet at $100 a foot. So what we have to encourage our clients to do collectively is pay less attention to the square footage because it's an arbitrary number, right? It's arbitrary.
It is.
You could go building to building. A landlord can call 15,000 square feet, and it'll feel completely different. It might be more efficient in one building, less in another. So getting my clients over that hurdle is always a challenge until you have that conversation and say, you don't pay rent in dollars per square foot. You pay rent in dollars. Right. So, but it's just really interesting when you're not out exploring the market and you're remaining in your space and it's growing. And I know it's to adjust for market loss factors, but it's still a tough pill to swallow. And I just never understood why there were no legal ramifications.
You nailed it. I mean, you really just have to say to your clients, look, think about it, space and how much it cost. Don't think about the square footage. Did you like the space? Can you fit your desks in there? And how much did it cost? Because the numbers mean nothing.
And how often in your leases do you not even specify square footage for that reason?
I always try to specify square footage.
Because I know
I try to get the right to remeasure for tenants, which I almost never get, but I try to get it.
I know in the majority of the smaller leases that I do, there's no square footage. It's just an annual rent.
Yeah.
Which is commonplace in New York.
It's commonplace, but it ties into the pro rata share. If they're paying pro rata share of real estate increases over the base tax here and real estate taxes. You come back into that number. And exactly, and OpEx, then it matters. Then that number matters.
Yep, that's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So obviously, we've seen just about every single industry revolutionized by tech. And I know this is a question that you were waiting to get. Your business is archaic.
Very.
Right?
Very.
Attorneys have been around since the beginning of time.
Yes.
Very noble. How do you see technology changing your business, call it in the next 5 or 10 years? And I know one way that it's revolutionized in the last 20 years, like we said, is Microsoft Office, right? Where people weren't able to redline. Where do you see it going from here?
So from my seat, I think it's really going to change in that, like, forms and drafting documents and just having forms that, I use them now. Like there's programs out there where you can basically have a form, fill in the blanks, and it just like saves time for me, right? But in terms of like revolutionizing everything, I mean, I can't think of any way that, like, from my seat, you'd really change the way things are done. Like, unless, like we spoke about earlier, there's some sort of uniform commercial lease for each city. And that's what you have to use. And these are always the terms, and they're not flexible at all. And, pretty much every building is built the same way. Mm-hmm. I don't see how you could really revolutionize it, because you need someone like me who's basically thinking, about everything all at once. There's so many moving factors. I don't think artificial intelligence could really do what I can do.
That's what I was going to...
What about from more of a macro perspective, not just necessarily funneled into commercial leasing law? What if it's, the new companies like Legal Shield or companies that help people find attorneys? How are technologies going to revolutionize?
Corporations and LLCs all the time, do simple operating agreements for like friends who are doing startups, even for tech startups, I would do them for them. Nowadays I go to LegalZoom.
Yeah.
Go to LegalZoom, it'll be cheaper, faster. Like, I don't want to waste your money. Like, if I'm not a value add, I don't want to even work for the client.
Sure.
So there's cheaper ways of doing things now, like LegalZoom. Trademarkia is a trademark company that you could just do a trademark very easily nowadays. I'm not getting paid by them, by the way, but I should be. There's a lot of different ways. I mean, right now, I would say in residential real estate, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, those things are, I mean, even in your business, like for when you're touring with clients, you have a client in London, you can't be there, you can do a virtual tour with them.
Yeah, I've been doing that a lot more often when I have national clients that can't be here. But also, let's talk about maybe your business development component, right? Are you guys as a firm or individually maybe doing any advertising campaigns to kind of bring in more business?
I'm here.
My man.
I'm here.
My man.
Yeah, I mean, things like that. But no, we're really not doing that much. I mean, our website is bolstered. We really juiced up our website, but we should be blogging more. We should be doing more things. Absolutely.
It's so interesting to hear these perspectives because our business, like your business, is so archaic in the way it's been done, where you have the people that kind of call it spearheaded these industries and they were pioneers and they're so big time and they were able to generate their business just from word of mouth. And if they had to make a phone call, they'd have a quarter in their pocket and they'd go to a phone and they'd call whoever they need to do business with. Today, with all the information at your fingertips, you could really get information out about anything and capture real leads or prospects that way. So it's very interesting to hear all the different people.
I use LinkedIn. I mean, I got my first client ever from LinkedIn like 16 years ago, but I don't know. At this level, I don't feel like I'm really getting clients from LinkedIn. I mean, do you? I mean,
not LinkedIn per se, but obviously with our blogs, we get a ton of business.
Right. But I think it's all about visibility.
Bingo.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not one thing or the other. It's the reason we're all sitting here right now. It's because visibility has changed. It used to just be word of mouth. That's how you were visible. But now you have to go above and beyond because as the environment evolves, we also have to evolve. Right. In order to be the best, you have to be doing more and more to be visible.
And to that point, I think that's an excellent point because I think if you're not visible on social media these days, you don't exist. Right. And it used to be word of mouth where if the CEO of Joe Schmo company negotiated the best deal, everybody would hear about it. But now, as soon as they go on LinkedIn and they see somebody talking about important lease aspects, they're going to say, wow, this guy really knows or girl really knows what they are talking about. I should maybe give them a shout. And it's visibility that didn't exist 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago for sure.
Absolutely.
So I think our generation specifically is at this unique inflection point where all of us should be really taking the time to cannibalize on this opportunity because there's only going to be a finite window before our competitors do it.
Absolutely.
Right? No, you're right. Absolutely.
So tell me in a nutshell, Mr. Blaymore, what's really going on?
What's really going on?
The world of real estate law.
What's really good in real estate law? I would say in leasing right now, super busy. The market's exploding. It's on fire. Small space sublease market, a little shaky. I'm seeing a lot of deals die. There's just a lot of inventory out there, I think.
Okay. You think it's also because people are losing funding or?
Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. None of my clients have, but I would say that's probably a part of it.
Yep.
Residential, I mean, high-end market, obviously not doing that well, but in the like $1 million down market, like it's on fire.
Yep.
So that's pretty much what's going on. What's
Love
really
it.
going on?
Well, thank you for
Thanks so
joining
much,
us.
Russ.
This was a lot of fun.
It.
Thanks
You know
for
we
having me,
love
guys.
you.
Love you guys, too.
If
Thank you.
anyone needs a good real estate attorney, Russ Blaymore at MMPS is your man.
Thanks,
Stay
buddy.
tuned
Thanks
for
having
more
me.
good content to come.